months to remember those who lost their lives at Grenfell. And before we start, can you please check your phones and computers, please? Thank you very much. Thank you. Are there any apologies for absence? And are there any declarations of interest? And please can I sign the minutes of the previous meeting as a true and accurate record?
Yeah.
Minutes. Great. Item 4, implementing council-wide service standards. Looks a very exciting paper. So, welcome. So, Sophie, do you want to introduce it briefly, or Johnny to introduce it briefly?
I can start.
Why don't you start?
Mostly, I think, as you say, it's a very exciting piece of work. I think I want to thank Sophie and the team that she's worked with in producing these standards, but above all, I want to thank the residents that were part of the co-design work that we did, because I think that's one of the elements of this that's really exciting, is that these are designed the first co-designed service standards anywhere in the city, possibly in the country. I think it's a big part of our Grenfell legacy work. We know that there are things we got wrong in the past, but we're determined to become the best and to improve the way that we interact with all of our residents, our customers, whoever we come into contact with. I think it's going to be vital now that we embed these standards across the organisation. I think there was real appetite for the council to improve and to learn those lessons and to ensure that it was confident and caring in everything that it did. When I went to one of the workshops at the Norwich Hub in Kensington as part of that co-design process. But the challenge is really for everybody in this room and everyone in these buildings. We've got to live and breathe these values and these standards. We need to hold ourselves accountable, and we need to make sure they're embedded in all of our services.
Thank you. So, questions for Sophie? Who should I start with? Catherine.
This was just so on page 29. Keisha emails in, and it's an example you've got about how she's got several complaints and she's talking to one person. And you suggest in that paragraph that there's a sort of triage system that they then go to the other services and come back with one collective answer. When I was looking through the sort of the implementation bit and the draft thing of how that was going to happen, on 2, responding to residents when it involves more than one team service, it didn't seem to quite match up with what you were suggesting they were going to do. So I wondered what was actually happening to solve that, because I can see it is a real issue.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say that the implementation plan is, it describes some additional work that we can do as an organisation to support adoption of these standards. But the real work, as Johnny says, needs to happen in every single team and by every single individual across the council. So we do need, as well as this implementation plan, to think about all the other work that goes on in service teams, and leadership will be critical to that. We do work holistically on our complaints team, so if a complaint comes in about multiple elements, we do actually treat it as a kind of case that we casework with the relevant services so people get one response. But of course that doesn't happen consistently if it's not coming through a complaints process. So someone might walk into the library and say, I've moved into the borough and I'd like to register for the library. And what we want to get to a place is, in that conversation, what they hear is, okay, so this is what you need to do about council tax, this is how you can apply for your parking permit. So they really do feel that we've listened to what's happening in their life and we're thinking about outside just our silos. So we need to do more work to make that happen. But in certain areas, that work is already happening and we need to kind of build on that across the organisation. And some of that is about the customer access programme, but some of it is actually just about how businesses, every single business and service and team across the council and individual, thinks beyond their own service area. So as Johnny said, there is work for us to do about that, and that work will be driven by EMT, directors and officer groups that we've developed to kind of drive these standards forward. So some work still to go, but we have pockets of good practice already happening across the council and we need to build on that.
Work in progress.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Jen?
Likewise, as my colleague, I think it's great to have good design service standards, and it's really useful for those that want that human interaction with the council. But there'll be a lot of people that actually want to self-serve and resolve their issues either digitally or sort of through forms and other sort of mechanisms of engaging with us. Your team has recently been very helpful at guiding me through some of the hurdles that we have in the documentation that we put out there. But I just wanted to check that we will continue to sort of mystery shop ourselves and really test our own services as to whether or not they link to one another.
Yes.
Individually they stand quite strong, but often two different departments are using slightly different formats of forms.
Yes, absolutely. So we do have a number of work streams looking at how we create consistency. That's what we talk about as being competent as well as caring. So consistency across the way we communicate with residents by letter, online, on the phone, and through social media and any other channel that people tend to use. So we are looking at what forms we use, and some of it will depend on our new technology platform, which we're currently in the work of shortlisting providers to come in and partner with us and start rolling that out. And actually being caring can feed into the way we do our digital offer as well. So if our digital offer is siloed as well, or doesn't give someone a feedback loop to say this is where the status of your request is, or make sure that it happens without them having to chase, that actually feeds into these standards as well. So I think we can apply these in a digital scenario as well, in making sure that it still meets someone's needs quickly, efficiently, and is comprehensive and predictable in the way it kind of responds to that. So I think we need to apply them beyond the way we interact with people face to face and on the phone, and make sure we're thinking about the way we write to people and the way we arrange our digital services as well.
It's comprehensive, isn't it?
Absolutely.
It's literally everything that we do.
Yeah.
Josh and then Kim.
Thank you, Sophie. No, thank you, and really pleased that we've got this going forward. I know in the report we speak a lot about the engagement of both residents and staff, but how are we going about letting residents know that this is coming into place, whether that is not just people necessarily use service, but everyone as possible, but staff as well, so ensure that they kind of all over the new system and how it works and the expectation, I guess, that we've given them.
So we've got two campaigns running, engagement and communication campaigns. One is external, so one of the first things we'll do is we'll arrange a thank you event with the residents who participated, and we're looking at how we communicate these. So of course they'll be on our website, but there are things like should they be included in our council tax letters out to people, so they actually can hold us to account and know what to expect, and kind of prod us when there are instances when we fail. So that piece of work is what we're doing externally. And internally, we've held two staff council-wide KNC live sessions with those. So two of those are focused on these. One last week was about the need now to adopt them. There's a whole series of lunch and learn sessions which are now fully booked out for staff, where we're giving them some support in some of the different skill sets they'll need. And then we're going on with series, so we're looking at curriculum training that we can offer to staff and ongoing communication campaigns within the organisation. Also, it's particularly looking at how managers need to be supported to make sure they create the environment for their staff to do this work and work in this way. So there's a whole campaign both within the organisation and externally to residents. And I think residents have been very clear, as the report states, that they have passed the baton to us now to do this. It's up to us, but they do need to see progress because they don't want to feel that time is wasted. So that external campaign, as you suggest, is really important to demonstrate to residents that we're taking this seriously.
Great, thank you. Double.
Yes. Paragraph 5.7 on page 21, it's got some pretty hard hitting statements in that, which obviously, as leaders and councillors, we need to take on board, and the importance of understanding the challenges that particularly frontline staff have, and also the importance of recognising their contribution and making sure that people do feel that value when they're not getting that feedback from beyond. But my question is really on the first block that says there's no consequence for staff members who don't live up to the values. So I suppose my question is, well, what are we going to do about that? Particularly when I look at the implication on note 10 on human resources. Human resources implication just talks about training. And what are other methods, such as, looking at things like discipline with people that aren't getting it, are being thought about?
Yeah.
Thank you.
And so I would say the first step towards that is actually having articulated what we expect, so that staff are very clear on what standard they have to be. So this is only the first step in that. And interestingly, we had a set workshop today with a number of staff and start thinking about how we create the environment to have these delivered. And one of the things that came through of that was actually how you look at every touch point on a member of staff throughout their time in the organisation, from induction to training to one-to-ones, objective settings, probation, and all of those elements of their interaction with the organisation, so that these are part of what they're accountable for in terms of their delivery. And from the way in which we routinely direct staff, hear on what's required of them, give them support to do that, but then hold them to account if they don't. These need to feed right into those mechanisms. So they need to be part of staff objectives, they need to be part of what we discuss at one-to-ones, and if people are failing to meet them, that needs to be reflected in appraisals, probation, and the way in which we use the policies that we already have in the organisation, but apply them specifically to what it is here that we've asked staff to achieve. And so I think the start is saying, we're absolutely clear with you about what you need to do, and now we can hold you to account very specifically for that with the mechanisms that we have in place in the organisation already, but also, of course, give them all the support to succeed as well.
I get that, but consequences.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you. So,
Just a quick question. Thank you, Sophie. So the strategy was done September 2020, so that's 3 years ago. We've got this fantastic implementation, which in all agreement is excellent. But when are you going to let us know that it's worked? When are we going to come back with the impact and anything to measure the impact? Would be great to know.
Absolutely. So we're working on some metrics at the moment, so that we've got some quantitative ways of measuring impact. So we're doing that for things like customer satisfaction and kind of the usual measures that you'd expect to see. But we're also looking at how we develop some more qualitative ways of understanding how that experience is being felt and what that means. I think we've recommended that there are quarterly and maybe 6 monthly reports on progress against this implementation plan. But actually, we've got a project board and a programme board set up that will be looking at it every 6 weeks to make sure it's progressing. So within the officer group, we've got oversight and assurance. But I think actually there's a question about how often you.
and I think that reflects the importance of whole customer delivery to our council plan, and it's absolutely fundamental to everything we do.
Yeah.
So we do need to make sure that
Yeah.
it's going ahead. Catherine and then Sarah.
Sorry, it was just a quick one, 'cause it's slightly. So looking at the age groups of people you spoke to, obviously most of them were over 55. So I just wondered, are you satisfied that this is addressing the younger people and the younger people's needs? Because they might be assessing or speaking or having, looking for different things.
Yeah.
Did you actually speak to enough people?
Well,
Young people.
so the group that were involved in the actual co-design process, we selected them out of about, I think there was about 74 applicants, and we selected a group to make sure that they were statistically representative of our population, so representative across different age groups. But then, of course, in the second consultation exercise when we had the draft,
Yeah.
we went out to all kinds of existing groups. Did that include the youth?
It did.
Yeah, so we've been working with the Youth Council quite closely across the customer programme, and so one of the things we did was to put to them as well. So they're quite a valuable resource for us.
Absolutely. Sorry, I
In
didn't
terms
sort
of
of see
consulting
there.
with them. Yeah, so they were
input
one of
into
the groups that were consulted on the draft, fed into that, and then that's when we came up with the final set.
Thank you very much.
Sarah?
It's just a little bit of feedback. Yesterday I met Michael Ash and he sang your praises and your team, but he made a point that this was really the best piece of co-design work that he's worked on to date. And he really thanks you and your team.
Well
everything.
well done.
So
Well
I
done.
thought to pass it on.
He was fantastic in helping to make this happen, and actually I've arranged to meet with him every 6 weeks, so we get a bit of an external prod to make sure that we're on the right track.
Mary, do you have any comments or questions? Right, well, if nobody else has any other comments, thank you very much. And can we agree all the recommendations in paragraph 10? Thank you. Right, now on to agenda item 5, which is the Q1 revenue and capital financial monitoring report. Sorry, I took some Mike's name, so I. You'll be here, no.
No, it's not anything, he's on
Okay, well, thank you very much for coming and fronting us.
Yeah.
Johnny.
Okay. Well, thank you to Lisa and the team for all the work they've done on this. I think the Q1 report reflects a lot of the challenges that we're facing. The picture is difficult, I think, for this council, and we're going to need to think really carefully about how we address that. In terms of what we're seeing here, there's a £5.1 million overspend in the first quarter, which is driven primarily by TA and housing need, which is a problem that has become much more acute in the past year or so, or possibly even more recently than that. And although it's a London-wide problem, it's certainly one that we're finding here and that we're going to do more to address. Another is the issue with industrial action in the ENC, which has had an impact on the environmental committee's testing line. And the third probably is treasury management, which has underperformed relative to our expectations. I think that means we're going to need to work very hard to close budget gaps over the coming years and be more prudent in our assumptions. It's worth saying that last year at this point we reported an overspend too, and we ended the year with an underspend. So these things are, to an extent, unpredictable, and therefore this isn't necessarily the picture that we'll come out with at the end of the financial year. But it's certainly shot across our bows, as it were, in the sense that we need to redouble our efforts to manage our budgets prudently, make sure that we're cautious in our assumptions, and address the kind of structural problems, particularly in housing need, I think.
Right, questions, comments? Or in areas?
I
Josh?
just thought I'd, well, thank you for putting this together. I know, it's that when you read the report, it doesn't have to give the full picture of that. Obviously, we're going to be discussing in due course with the budget. So, on the face of it, for adult social care and public health, it looks quite reasonable, but that was not taking into account the pressures that are coming down the track, and that is those discharged from hospital services that we need to account for, the rising costs of people using the service, which obviously adding extra pressures, and a whole host of other issues that are affecting the health sector in the borough, which I won't go into right now. But it's still having it's still going to have an impact. We really need to have a think that the most vulnerable in our society, we need to obviously help them. But also weigh that up with the budgetary pressures that not just this particular, but the entire council is under as well, without kind of doing what we do best, and we're aiming to do the best council, of course. I just wanted to kind of put that out there as a general struggle, but just for you, your position, where do you see it mostly going over the next? And it's very difficult to look in the crystal ball. If we don't take any measures now, where could we potentially be in a year's time, 2 years' time, if we don't start thinking about this element of our budgets?
Yeah, okay, thank you, good question. If we don't think now, I don't think we'll be able to set our budget.
Oh, right.
So, I think we'll talk about this more the away day tomorrow. 24-25 isn't so much the issue, it's the following year, 25-26. which sounds a long way away, but actually isn't, because if they're going to do some quite fundamental things, they're going to need a leading time to them as well. So we need to really get working on them now, ready for them to be implemented. And if we can implement them early, then that's always good as well. We can start delivering transformation and savings earlier, we can put into the bank for future years. If we don't, we will need to use reserves. That's not good practice to set the budget. It's not recommended. Reserves are one-off, so you can only use them once, replenishing them. So that's not a good position to be in either. So my advice would be act early. Some of those decisions will be difficult, but I think if you do them early, they're in a managed way. If you leave them and do them in a panic, and because you're forced to, it's harder. So the earlier we can start working on it, the better.
Thank you. Jem?
So a question for you, Lisa, and then maybe one for Dan. The one to you is around the treasury management, because in previous papers we had seen that we were expecting interest rates to not get as high as they have to come down. So we were perhaps underestimating how much income we might generate from the treasury. So to find that we have a lower than expected output on it, does that mean we either have a smaller treasury on which we've collected interest, or were our assumptions on the amount of interest we were going to get wrong? Or maybe it's a combination of both.
So it is a combination of both. So we're holding less cash balances because we are borrowing when we really need to, because borrowing rates are high. So therefore we're not earning interest on that. And also we probably overestimate as well. So it's a combination of the two. Things are starting to level out a little bit at the moment. So hopefully the position you're seeing here will improve as the year goes on. But I don't have a crystal ball and can't forecast that. But we're keeping a really, really close eye on that. Conversations we're having around the capital programme, and really when do we need to borrow? We don't certainly I think we don't want to borrow too early, because if we do, that incurs costs of borrowing.
So if I'm understanding correctly, it's not necessarily interest on cash we have at hand of historic reserves, it's forward borrowing to finance the programmes that we hold on which we accrue interest. But as you say, we borrow less now because the interest rates are higher, but presumably then there's a cash saving on the amount of interest we're not paying.
Yeah, and it's the
By
balance of
forward
the
borrowing.
two, so
So
we're
this
not
is the net
earning
balance,
interest and we're not paying interest unless it's the two.
Sorry, but
Yeah,
the other
okay.
sorry, Dan, it's one for you, but it's on the, obviously TA is going to be a big, well, it's already a big topic of discussion, but just something I was curious about, we say that the average annual cost per placement in a hotel is £40,000, which is a very large number, and obviously if we have 100 of those, as the paper suggests, it's very, very large number. My question is, where are we sourcing these properties from? Because even a 2-bedroom apartment in Kensington, Chelsea, you can rent for less than that figure for a year. So
Which the hotels or the hotel accommodation. So we don't. The hotel accommodation is. I need to check on the detail of precisely kind of what the procurement method is, if you see what I mean. We tend to use hotels in and near the borough. And where we're using hotels, it's because we've not been able to secure at the time that we need it, which is often very quickly, a suitable property either in the borough, if that's deemed necessary for the household concerned, or out of the borough if not. So then I can come back with a bit more detail on on what that triage process looks like and how the procurement works, if you like. But we would only ever use hotels in a scenario where we weren't in time able to find a home, because of course not only is it more expensive to use a hotel, but it's a worse housing outcome for them as well.
it would just be interesting to see how we're sourcing them and whether we're getting a fair value in those emergency cases.
Of course.
Anything else? Any other comments? Catherine?
This is probably a very stupid question, so apologies in advance. On the page 155, the dedicated schools grant, as we know, we're running up a deficit overspend in our high needs, which in 23-24 will be up to 8 million. And I know we've got a sort of an agreement of delivering better value. But where in our overall budget do we show that deficit? Because in the end, who is responsible for that deficit and where does it appear in our budget? Or doesn't it have to appear in?
Yeah, so the dedicated schools grant is a ring fence grant, so you're not seeing it in the front tables of this report. It'll be held on our reserves, and it is, we are responsible for it, so we need to have a plan to bring that 8 million down over a period.
Yes, which we're unlikely to do. I just wonder where we go with that, I guess.
I think we need to work to do that over time, but it will take a long time. And the delivering better value money that we now have, £1 million will help.
Well, it doesn't go against that number.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
It's about longer term. So we're investing that money now to try and create longer term benefits, which in turn.
But that's very unlikely to happen. I mean, I think we have to be on. I guess what I'm saying is we have to be realistic about that. That's not going to happen.
Long term.
Emma, did you want to?
No, I didn't fully understand that, but that's my fault, so ignore me.
Well, now Lisa to repeat it.
Yeah, so you were talking about the DSG being held. Mine's
The
the
deficit.
but it's a passport. You know, it's not our money. We just passport.
So we're deficit in that.
So we don't passport it pure, we passport to schools, we still retain.
We do keep you right.
Yeah.
10%, don't we?
We retain an element around high needs.
I'm sorry,
Sorry, we retain an element.
for the high needs. Yeah. So it's that bit you were talking
Yes,
about, not the other. Sorry.
Any,
Can I just ask a general question about the reserves, please? Partly because I was looking through what in my new portfolio housing is coming out of reserves, and actually one of them I'm very excited about, special projects, asking for money for the housing and tenancy fraud in the investigations team, which so far has been very successful. So thank you to my predecessor for putting that in place, Kim. But in general, is it good practice to do so many things out of reserves? Does that happen, or? I'm sorry, I'm on page 177.
reserves are a really part
Yes.
of that. We should be
In year four,
husbanding
plus
our-
usable reserve commitments. Just reading through them all, some of them look as if they should be kind of business as usual things, rather than coming out of our reserves, or maybe that's what reserves are for.
So you've got different kinds of reserves, you've got usable reserves, earmarked reserves and unusable reserves, and they're detailed on page 1.28 of the report. And then you're looking,
177.
177 is the detail of those reserves. Now, it's not good practice to set your budget on reliance on reserves, but reserves are usually for one-off or special things, so sometimes they span over a couple of years. We've been doing a lot of work with Johnny on reserves, and we bought paper earlier in the year to joint leadership team, and we're bringing another paper next month, where we'll put some criteria around use of reserves, so making sure that they're not funding ongoing revenue costs, they're not being used for more than 2 years, they're not being used for staffing, which is ongoing, so we're putting a lot more rigour around the use of reserves, because as I said earlier, they are monotonous, so once you've used them, unless you replenish them, they're not there for the future, so it's not good practice to become reliant on them.
Can I say, when we come to the recommendations, most of the recommendations is to note things in this report, but there are two things which that we have to agree. As we're talking about reserves, one of the things we need to agree tonight is the movement between reserves set out in section 24 and the new requests in table 15B.
Yeah.
And we need to agree those are above £250,000 in table 15C. So that is page 159, or 149 and 150. We're just highlighting, if there are any questions about that, but that's what we will be seeking for, your agreement on this evening. I've got the other stuff is noting that that's asking for agreement, so that's what we're just doing. Okay, Catherine?
Thank you for flagging that up, because actually I did mark against the cost we've got for Maxilla CIC, which obviously is quite a substantial amount. support for crossing capacity building.
We didn't start.
I know we haven't started, but I just wondered why they were such large figures, the 250,000.
I would need to, I don't know the detail of what that is. It's over 2 years. I think it's to put extra capacity into.
Well,
Is this my
Sarah, yeah, Marcella, you
Okay.
would know about this.
So just point me exactly which line, sorry.
It's
149.
page,
I'm on 149. What am I-
second one
Oh,
down,
here, this one, sorry.
Marcella. It's basically asking for capacity, because I suspect because we slowed down quite a lot, it's taken us quite a few years, and perhaps it's community capacity. And Sue is nodding.
Yeah, and it's also for the legacy group as well, so because we've committed or we offered that possibility to Maxilla, then the third steering group also needed similar funding to the system.
The other thing,
There's also been some enabling works in there, I think, as well.
I don't think this is.
Yeah, but this
work,
is about
this is
support
capacity
to the
building.
Yeah, this is
Fine.
Mary, I won't forget you. Can I just ask everyone also to look at the general fund capital programme funding request, section 21, table 12C, because we need to read that as well when we come to the agreement. I just want you to just have a focus a bit. Not that you're not focusing, but. Page 143, the capital programme request. And I'm sure we've seen all these, but just to be sure what we're agreeing to.
What's an example of various requirements?
So that's just the small schemes of less than 100K. I can get the detailed breakdown.
Just more curiosity than anything, it's just, even like an
It
example.
adds up, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I'll get you a breakdown.
Any other comments or questions from the leadership team? Mary?
Yeah, I mean, we had a very long and helpful discussion with Johnny and Lisa, but I suppose 3 points that I'd just like to share, which some of which have been covered here already, was obviously we were concerned particularly about the temporary accommodation budget, and everyone can see that that's a problem lurking in the wings, or not even lurking in the winds anymore. And also about winter pressures on adult social care and whether they're really adequately reflected in the budget.
Yeah.
And the final thing the committee asked for, and Lisa very kindly said that would be included in future, we were talking about Section 106 money and not having enough information about that, but also SIL money isn't in there at all in the reports, and so we've asked that in future it will be included, and they were happy
That
to
sounds
do
very
that, but I
sensible.
think that's would be helpful for everybody.
Thank you. That sounds very helpful. Okay, well, if there aren't any more comments from the questions, can we agree the recommendations in paragraph 2? As I said, most of them are noting things, but 2.5 is agreeing the general fund capital programme funding request, and 2.7 is the movement between reserves and agreeing those above 250k. Okay? Agree? Thank you very much. And I don't believe there's anything else on the agenda. Is there any other business? Very much.